Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session, The Invisible Weight of MLRO Responsibility and How to Reduce It. Here we are in early 2026, and the landscape for legal AML compliance has never been as complex. I'm Graham. I'm the Director of AML and Economic Crime Risk here at Amiqus. I'm an ex-AML regulator, formerly the head of AML at the Law Society of Scotland, where I built out the supervisory inspection function and processes there. I was also a member of the Legal Sector Affinity Group, or LSAG, across this period, and was heavily involved in the extensive 2020 rewrite of the LSAG guidance, which I'm imagining you're all very well aware of. That said, today isn't about the regulations or supervision, but hopefully it is about guidance. It's about how to navigate the realities of living with the regulations, their requirements, and how we might start to reduce the burden placed upon you as MLROs. We'll be discussing practical examples and strategies to help you in your day-to-day work. With this in mind, I'm delighted that Elizabeth Bray, partner and MLCO at Geldards, has joined me today.
Oh, thanks, Graham. I spent 10 years as a commercial litigator, just for a bit of background, before I moved into compliance. Now, as the MLRO of Geldards, of course, with my amazing MLRO and my compliance team, I'm in the trenches, as it were. I deal with the partners who want the deal done yesterday, junior lawyers who are terrified of bothering a client for their passport, and of course the regulator who wants to see that our processes actually work on a day-to-day basis and in the heat of battle.
Thank you. And for those that have tuned in today or are watching post-event, we want this session to be a practical, honest look at the MLRO and MLCO role. It's often a role-only position. Our goal is to help you move from being a policeman, if you were, or a bottleneck, to being an orchestrator who has confidence in the firm's risk profile and its control mechanisms without having to manually check every single file. Over the next 40 or so minutes, we are going to explore three key areas. Number one, how to manage risk when work is distributed across teams. Number two, what effective control actually looks like in 2026, particularly from a regulator's perspective, and where the cracks usually appear in a busy firm. And number three, practical ways to gain confidence at a glance, if you like, improving your visibility and control without slowing down your fee earners or turning yourself into a bottleneck. What's the takeaway? Well, we hope that you'll leave with a clearer view of where risk could quietly enter your process, and as importantly, practical tips and examples for building an AML in a control environment that stays effective even when you as MLRO or MLCO aren't in the room. No time like the present. I've got a coffee with me here, Elizabeth. Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I wanted to start with a question that I suspect many of you have asked yourselves, perhaps unfortunately one that may keep you awake at night. What are the risks inherent in the files that I haven't had eyes over today? As an MLRO or Senior Compliance Officer in the UK legal sector, you carry a title that carries in itself significant weight. But here's the issue. While the law says the buck stops with you, the reality is that your firm's compliance is actually being decided in so many tiny, frantic moments by people who aren't you. It could be decided by the conveyancer trying to hit a Friday completion, who maybe accepts a blurry scan of a bank statement. It's decided by the partner who knows the family and maybe skips a probing question about a source of wealth. This is, what we mean by the invisible weight. You are accountable for the outcomes of processes that you don't touch and decisions that you didn't personally make. This accountability can be to your fellow senior management and partnership along with the regulator, because, of course, individuals and your partners within the business can themselves be subject to disciplinary action for AML failures, which ultimately fall at your doorstep. And as the UK moves towards more rigorous FCA-style supervision, I didn't see it as unlikely to cut it. It's a key vulnerability. But as you are all too aware, Elizabeth, you can't be everywhere at once. And that must feel like a really difficult place to be sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That is the real paradox. I'm accountable, but I'm not in control. So my hands and eyes, as it were, are the fee earners and support staff. But of course, they're making thousands of micro decisions every week under billing pressure, under client pressure. And those decisions accumulate into the firm's risk profile, which I'm then signing off on.
Yeah, it's an agency problem, right? You have to delegate risk assessments to fee earners for them to have any real validity, but you only know what you can see. You may have different cultures between offices, locations, jurisdictions. I remember back in banking in the mid-2000s, I was responsible for setting up sanctions controls across jurisdictions, and that in itself was not without challenge. For example, the Moscow office had a very different view of the sanctions regime than the London office, obviously.
Yeah, I can really imagine that. And we do find that from team to team, and the teams who are perhaps the most diligent might be the ones who are lower risk, like a Clin Neg team, and sometimes vice versa. But we were talking about what keeps you up at night. And, sometimes I'll listen to podcasts like the Dark Money Files. Absolutely fantastic. But you can feel a real sense of hopelessness, can't you? Investigative journalists have taken months or even years to unravel these criminal structures. How can we possibly do it in a standard KYC process? Well, you can't. And whilst the SRA guidance is really welcome, sometimes it can feel quite overwhelming, I think, for people.
Sure.
We do have to remember it is a risk-based approach, and not every file needs that forensic level of due diligence.
And I guess, let's be honest, about the rainy Tuesday night factor, most MLROs or MLCOs are juggling fee earners, fee earning, or they're a CULP or a DPO and the cash room manager, sometimes all at once.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm lucky enough not to be fee earning as MLCO, but even if you're not doing that, then probably you're dealing with PII claims or complaints, general SRA compliance issues, conflicts, confidentiality, not to mention all those constant updates we get like ECTA, MAZER. I would also say it's easy to get a false sense of security sometimes if you're just doing checks on files at the end of the month, say checking 5% of files. You're only really doing a post-mortem there. And if you're not using that data to then act on, it's not really giving you much. You're also dealing with the possibility, aren't you, that fee earners don't give full consideration to risks, as you've touched on, or might make kind of higher risk compliance decisions without perhaps consulting with the MLRO or due to client time pressures, all completely understandable, but does leave us perhaps out of the loop a little.
Yeah, and that's interesting. What do you see most often on the ground, I guess, as the drivers of poor or, say, unbalanced decision-making by fee earners? Have you got any examples?
Yeah, well, I think fee earners can make assumptions that, known professionals or repeat clients are low risk. That's something we really commonly experience pushback about, although that update in the LSAG guidance did really help with that. Or fee earners might make a rushed decision. This transaction looks like one I've seen before, so it's going to be similarly straightforward. The risks will be the same. A recent example for me was a matrimonial matter, actually. So we were acting for the wife, husband on the other side. And after financial disclosure, it became clear that the husband had been involved probably in private banking activities. Okay. So that obviously leads to a reporting obligation for us as wife's solicitor. But I do often think about the MLRO in that firm acting for the husband when that came across their desk. Because obviously, it's lower risk work from an AML perspective. You probably at the outset wouldn't have done source of funds, source of wealth checks on a matrimonial matter. So you're very much dependent on your fee earners really spotting those red flags.
Yeah, of course. Okay. I mean, so many factors there, which are kind of just, again, we'll go on to this in a minute, just kind of could easily slip through the cracks, you know? Okay, Elizabeth, we've hopefully laid out the fundamental issue here in a bit of detail. I think it's important to set this against the context of regulatory expectations too, right? It's important to recognize that the regulators have moved from asking, do you have a process, to does your process actually work? I guess they want demonstrable effectiveness.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's the shift, if you like, from sort of output to outcome, isn't it? So doing the check is an output, but understanding the risk is the outcome. So in an ideal world, in a perfect world, if the SRA walked into my firm today, I'd want to show them, I guess, a live dashboard of risk, not just a spreadsheet from 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, I guess the overall risk profile of the business, or split by business area, numbers and status of, say, high-risk files or PEPs, for examples. Who's done the training in the firm, results of file reviews, and what have you then actually gone and done with those results? And also, I guess maybe at a more granular level, how easily would you be able to pull all this necessary AML information at client and matter level if they ask to see a file? Is it all in one place? Is it catalogued? Is it time and date stamped? Is it easily accessible? Or would you be scrambling around across different systems or parts of your file, your tech, or your drives to get that information? And it's something that is really important to us here at Amicus, that system of record, if you like. This is exactly the type of information, of course, that the FCA are used to seeing in the financial services world, and will likely expect to see in the legal sector moving forward.
It all sounds quite frightening when you put it like that, doesn't it? Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think one of the things we also need to think about is file closure. It sounds so trite, but it is an area where law firms do fall down sometimes. If you have an AML inspection, though, Graham, as you know, they ask to see a list of open files and recently closed files. Now, if you have fee earners who still have files open from 5 or perhaps even more than 5 years ago that should have been closed, that's going to be on your list of files for the regulator. And were your processes the same 5 years ago? They very likely weren't. You know, AML has changed dramatically. Processes and procedures have moved on, and you're not going to be able to demonstrate that you are following your current processes back on those old files.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen firms slip up on that so many times as well. It's an overlooked area.
It is, and obviously feeds into lots of other risk management points. But in my firm, what we've tried to do is really embed responsibility. So each department is contributing to that live dashboard of risk that we've talked about, and our firm-wide risk assessment. That's good for me, obviously, because that shared intelligence kind of reduces the pressure on me as MLCO, on my colleague as MLRO, as the sole filters. But it also hopefully helps with kind of greater ownership of those AML decisions. So really driving the message, you know, that's so important, I think, that AML is not a back office function done by somebody else. It's actually a shared responsibility, which is really part of your professional obligations as a fee earner. And hopefully then there's more of a kind of proactive real-time feedback loop to ensure that our risk profile and the metrics are kept up to date.
And this helps evidence, I guess, the risk-based approach at the firm too, right? That your firm-wide risk assessment is dynamic, it informs risk appetite, and that supports the context on which client and matter level risk assessments are actually being completed on the ground. Also, I guess, trends and data collected at client or matter level are then fed up to back up to inform your firm-wide risk assessment, exactly what the regulator expects to see in terms of demonstrable effectiveness. Another one is ensuring the clear line of sight between risk assessment outcomes and the level and, critically, the type of due diligence performed. And that's really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on risk assessments, we've all seen risk assessments. Well, I hope you all haven't. It's not just me, but say medium because neither high nor low. One of the issues, I think, is how to persuade people or help them to make those risk assessments more valuable. As we know, often that information is all in their head. It's just about getting it down on the page. So I try to give examples of what good looks like. You know, if you're doing your risk assessment, what do you need to put down? So you might be saying, well, this is a property development company that's been established for more than 5 years. It's got filed accounts. I can see that the purchase is in line with its usual transactions. It's being funded by bank finance. So let's mitigate that risk down from perhaps high, because we're dealing with a property matter, down to medium. Something like that is just so much more valuable for evidencing the risk decision which has been made. And usually people will have much, if not all of that information, either from the initial meeting or if it's a known client from their experiences in the past with dealing with them.
And that is holistic due diligence. That is background and context. And that is really key when we're trying to assess money laundering risk in a client or a transaction, right?
Yeah.
Tone from the top. Tone from the top and culture is a big point for the regulator too. I'm well aware, both the SRA and of course in Scotland too. Something not necessarily policed though by the regulations, but if you get this right, it helps MLCOs, MLROs rest a bit easier. We'll touch upon training a bit later on, and that's critical at ground level, but tone from the top, setting the culture, is equally as important. As an ex-regulator, it's fundamentally important to see senior management engagement at the firm. You need not only the MLCO or the MLRO to be engaged, you need the partnership, the directors, the senior management to be engaged too, and demonstrate they're engaged. They need to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. One way, of course, to show this, that AML is a priority at board or partnership meetings, through it being discussed as, say, a fixed agenda item on a merit, etc. But more practically, Elizabeth, in your experience, any thoughts on how you do this?
Well, we do keep it on the board papers, of course, and it is on our agenda every month. But I think you need to remember that all of this comes at a cost to the business. So, my wages, the cost of whatever your electronic ID and V solution is, the time doing the onboarding. So I think it is key for MLROs, MLCOs, compliance teams to show the savings to their board. So those savings are, fines being avoided, reputational risk being avoided, but also clients retained because that process that you're using is easy for them. I think all of that, it really feeds into that tone from the top as well.
Yeah, and another way to emphasise the value is that surely by doing good quality risk assessments and due diligence, you're getting closer to your clients. Really knowing and understanding them surely is simply good business sense.
Absolutely. And that's how I always start my AML training. It's not just from an AML perspective, it's going to help with fee recovery. It's going to help with minimizing complaints and claims. But the better you know your client, the more likely you are to get repeat business. It's absolutely a win-win.
Yeah. And you touched upon this just a minute ago as well. Speaking about the AML in terms of a key reputational risk to the business, paint the picture in terms of the adverse media or how it would feel pitching up to an event or a client meeting when the opposite side of the table know fine well that you've just been hit with an SRA or an FCA censure or fine. I mean, start talking about compliance as a key business and competitive advantage. Get this right and get AML right, and you can start to make efficiencies and deliver faster and more effectively for your clients.
Yeah, completely.
Okay, right. So let's move on to where this risk might quietly enter your processes, where it might, I guess, creep through your control framework and seed itself without you even realizing it until, unfortunately, you uncover those breaches. We've already discussed the multiple roles of an MLRO or an MLCO may have, but even within their AML role, the breadth of what you need to cover can sometimes be huge, right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, our firm-wide risk assessment is 62 pages long. I'm sure we're not alone in that. I'm sure bigger firms have even longer ones. Absolutely. It's not an easy document to keep up to date, current and fit for purpose. And even just keeping up with those LSAG and HMT updates can feel exhausting. And then in terms of, who you are, who you've got doing these roles, on the one hand, if the role holder doesn't have a specific AML background or training, it can perhaps inhibit the MLO role's ability to really proactively identify risk, perhaps get the arms around the business in that way. But on the other hand, if you haven't been a fee earner, do the partners listen to you? Do they dismiss you as, that awful phrase, business prevention? And then, areas such as beneficial ownership can be where people trip up because they can be incredibly complicated. For example, which shareholdings count for PSC purposes? Do preference shares count? What if they don't have voting rights? What if they've got no right to a dividend? It's not straightforward. Or you could be looking at a trust, which of course can be incredibly complex when you're trying to understand control.
It's not an easy job. Absolutely. And I know actually in preparation for this section, you had mentioned a really good example of a trust spider web. Can you possibly share that?
Yeah, of course. It was it gave us a few headaches, to be honest, this one. So we were instructed by the settlor of a trust. The settlor was a UK national, but based in both the UK and Switzerland. The trust was based in Sweden. The trustees were both Czech nationals, but based in Switzerland. The protector was a US national, based in the US. And then the beneficiary was a US national who split their time between the US and Switzerland. Don't ask me why it was set up like this, because I can't remember, although at the time I did know. Obviously, the complexity of the setup meant it had to be assessed as high risk, and we had to do all those EDD additional measures. But at the time of the first meeting, you could see that the fee earner might just have known that they were being instructed by a UK national about a trust in Sweden, which wouldn't be a high-risk country.
Okay, just give me a minute while I try and jot all that.
I had to do so many pictures.
It might take me a while. What a great example of, say, hidden risk, as we've discussed at the client or a transaction level, right? And then you have the sensitivities around those that manage the client relationships too, right? And the handoffs between people or areas. Who's responsible for what, you know?
Exactly. And we've all seen that, haven't we? Those partners who are prickly about you contacting their clients to get the ID. But then conversely, you might have people who are much more relaxed and ignore those triggers and leave the next team who are opening a new matter to update the POI. It's really important to break down those information silos, isn't it? Where the fee earner knows useful context or information, but that isn't then relayed to the others who need to know it. For example, the onboarding teams. So in our firm, similar to many others, we have a centralised CMI team who obtain the KYC POI documents and review all the information obtained, including those risk assessments at the client opening stage. So hopefully that ensures kind of consistent application of our standard processes, which then should decrease the risk. But obviously, we can't rely entirely on the CMI team. As you said, Graham, you know, we do need fee earner input, and the risk assessments do need to be theirs. As we've already said, you know, it's all right if it's in your head, but you've got to write it down, haven't you?
It's the auditor's mantra, isn't it? If it's not written down, it didn't happen. In this context, also, we have to address this, I guess, the long-term relationship trap. That's why, as we mentioned previously, during the development of the LSAC guidance, we as a group inserted a specific section on this in the updated version.
Yeah, and as I said, that was so helpful for us on the ground to really explain to people, it doesn't matter how long you've known them, you still have to do the due diligence, you know. I'm sure we've all had fee earners who are reluctant to contact their long-term or high net worth clients for ID or source of funds information, especially that now, fearing that they'll be irritated. And whilst that might have been the case in the past, I think what our experience is now is that the vast majority are extremely used to these requirements. You know, they don't just see them from law firms, they see them from financial services sector as well. So I think that reluctance should be diminishing a little bit now. For example, we had one large multinational client where we had to ID the ultimate beneficial owner, who was a Swiss. I don't know why we seem to deal with so many Swiss people, a Swiss multi-millionaire. And the fee earning team were really nervous about getting in touch with him. But he happily completed his Amiqus check. You know, he did it in a number of couple of minutes. It was really smooth. And then by doing that, we had a happy client that we'd done the right thing by, and we'd made a good impression. I think often these things are far less of a problem than perhaps we anticipate.
Okay. Yeah, a quick big up on Amiqus there. Thank you. It's important that the service that we deliver, I guess, as a SaaS company delivering these services to you, works not only for our clients, i.e. law firms, but their clients too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's critical for you and us. So let's move on to another area which is susceptible, ongoing monitoring. We're talking about ongoing monitoring through transactions or relationships. Clients change, transactions change, fee earners change. Understanding the background and context on which to assess ongoing or changing risks is as important as the initial onboarding in many situations.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I know personally ongoing monitoring often feels like the hardest piece to get right. You know, there's no silver bullet. Of course, there isn't anywhere within AML, unfortunately, but there really isn't for ongoing monitoring. And there's no hard and fast rule about what's enough. Understandably, I guess, fee earners would prefer a set process, so update the ID every 12 months. But as we know, that's not sufficient for every matter. So you could then diarise more frequent updates for PEPs or high-risk clients or matters, which I do. But that's not perfect either, is it? Because it risks the fee earners becoming so focused on those set timescales that they miss when a relevant change has actually happened, like a change of funding on a matter.
Trigger-based monitoring, right?
Exactly.
So when something actually happens, in real time almost,
Yeah. I do remember one matter we had where the funding changed partway through, and it made sense in the context of the transaction. So the fee earner didn't raise it with us, and we in the risk team only became aware at the end when it was clear the funds were coming from a different party. It wasn't an issue in this case. Luckily, it was coming from a different group company. It didn't slow the transaction down, but it absolutely could have done because we were having to obtain the POI at the last minute. So that's where I often start with our fee earners is, by doing this up front, you're saving time for your client, but also for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess speed, pressure versus due diligence and AML control. Sometimes those are inevitably opposing forces, right? This can be manifested in, I guess, so many different ways. Too much focus on process or ID&V, not enough focus on the underlying risks, or what I refer to as the potential white elephants in the corner of the room. The trap of using risk matrices or set due diligence processes which may not actually identify risks or mitigate them.
Yeah, I think that's right. Or it could be pressure and responsibility being delegated too far to junior members of the team where there aren't, appropriate checks and balances, or perhaps enough training hasn't happened yet. Particularly where, as we know, they've got competing pressures to get the deal over the line, exchange, get the fees booked, whatever it might be. And, we've said before, fee earners are, of course, meant to complete the risk assessments, but how often do we see them done primarily by support teams with a little bit of input from the fee earner?
Yeah. It can be, as we've said, it's a scary place. But okay, so on that note, let's move on to hopefully some practical measures that MLROs, MLCOs might be able to adopt to ensure they sleep that wee bit better every night. For me, it's this concept, as we said, of moving away from policing to orchestrating. An important starting point in this day and age is the use of technology and structured workflows, creating audit trails, MI, that provide that, I guess, confidence at a glance. How do you do this? Create a single source of truth to record digital audit trails and drive MI, an end-to-end system of record. For example, as we've discussed, dashboards can let you perhaps see pressure points, like a specific team falling behind on, say, pet checks or high-risk matters before they become systemic breaches.
Yeah, standardization is definitely the goal, isn't it? That's the ideal.
Yes.
And smart forms would ensure that every fee earner is collecting data in the same way, ensure the quality, format and consistency of that data being fed in, to ensure that this is then collated, I suppose, summarised and analysed in the back end in real time in the same way. So that's the dream, as it were. That's the ideal. But I guess we've got to remember the tech is only as good as the risk assessment put in with it, isn't it? And we all know everyone's human. People will find workarounds if they don't understand the purpose of it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And that's, I guess, where culture and training needs to be embedded along with any new systems.
Yep.
Also, in terms of the systems themselves and system-based controls, we've discussed this previously. If you could tell us about the hard stop system, I guess, that you've implemented within Geldards.
Yeah, I think a number of firms do a similar thing. So our system allows for a 2-week pending period, which means that preliminary work can start, but no bills can be sent and no money received until that POI has been completed and obtained in that 2-week period. And once the 2-week clock runs out, the matter's frozen. So the key thing for the fee earners is they can't record any time. So that tends to be the real trigger to gather that POI if it hasn't happened already. So it's a system control that really hopefully ensures that onboarding must happen, before you can go too far down the line.
Could be deemed somewhat harsh, but effective, It's so important that a really strong example of system-based controls, and I've come across many firms that do implement that sort of thing as well. And with those controls, you start to turn the corner into being proactive rather than reactive, and I guess orchestrate rather than police after the event.
Yeah, that's what you're aiming to do, isn't it? I suppose the other issue to flag, as always, is that clunky processes just don't endear themselves to fee earners or lend themselves to them then following that clunky process. So the smoother you can make it, the better.
Yeah, and you've got to make compliance easy for the firm, for the fee earners, clear, easy to follow, efficient processes, procedures. If you can, I guess, automate the 95% of easy files, if you like, you can then really start to hone in on the 5% of the more complex or the higher risk ones. Although I think we were about to talk about complacency as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that. That is why setting your firm's risk appetite is so important, isn't it? And that's the benefits of a real dynamic risk-based approach, getting your firm-wide risk assessment in order, because of course every firm is different, and the types of work you do will be very different. The types of clients you're dealing with will be very different. But it does make sure, if you're doing it this way, you're not dealing with kind of old assumptions, stale information. You are as up to date as possible. But I was going to say, if you think 95% of your business is low risk, how do you avoid complacency? You've got to, I think, in that case, and it might well be 95% is low risk, but in that case, you'd need to think about really thematic, targeted reviews on those areas where you're seeing issues from the audits that you're doing. That will improve the quality, but hopefully show proactive oversight to your regulator as well as to your board. And then you're demonstrating your own value, aren't you, to your firm? This is what I'm doing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Another nod there to bring in how important training and culture is to counter that complacency. To me, it's about making it real for fee earners and practitioners in the context of their own their personal lives. Make it less abstract. Fee earners need to know and understand the whys and not just the hows. It's not just about fines, it's about reputational risk, and hopefully they get the kind of wider societal harm that's included in that. And this isn't just a kind of bureaucratic hurdle. We can't just teach them, them's the rules, you've just got to suck it up. That doesn't wash. We've got to explain the whys and the wherefores. And you mentioned there, scenario-based training is also much more effective. Show them what good looks like in the context of their day-to-day work.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And making AML compliance visible is important as well. It can be those simple messages, checklists on posters, screensavers, and as you say, bringing in that societal harm as well. This is an example of what money laundering has actually done. Link it to modern slavery. There are loads of these examples out there, aren't there? But I think you do need, as MLRO, MLCO, to be careful to balance regular updates with information overload or fatigue. You don't want to be in a position where your emails are being auto-forwarded to a folder, never to be seen again. But, there's lots of ways to do it. You could focus on, say, AML champions within the firm who are on the ground, helping there and really keeping that momentum going. As you've touched on, we base our training on our audit findings, and we've run surveys as well to ask staff where they feel confused, exposed, what are those real issues that they're struggling with, just to make that training as targeted as possible. Just to make sure that we are dealing with what they're actually seeing on a day-to-day basis, not the theoretical.
Finally, what about, there's another one that, I used to speak to when I was a regulator, when I was speaking to firms as well. What about linking compliance to bonus and remuneration decisions? Is a tricky one, right? It's quite a sensitive topic. Is this something that you've got experience or thoughts on?
Well, I absolutely do have thoughts on it, Graham. And generally with my risk management, exactly. With my risk management hat on, I think it's a very good idea. I think bonuses should take compliance with training with other firm procedures into account. It's about being a good citizen, as it were, setting a good example, not just being a strong biller. And I think we also have to remember that not everybody's a fee earner, right? But they all might still have AML responsibilities. So, it's about rewarding those people who are doing it right. Absolutely. And as I say, I think that will help across the piece from a risk management perspective. It's going to help with your failure to prevent fraud controls, isn't it? It's just general good risk management, not just from an AML perspective.
Yeah, it protects the firms and it protects the clients as well, Yeah. So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground there. To close, what I'd like to then kind of direct the audience here. We want to give you 3 challenges to take back home with you, mull over, and hopefully work towards. As we close, I'd like you to concentrate or take back to the firm. Number 1, visibility. Do you have visibility of all high-risk matters right now? And how quickly could you get that information? Number 2, consistency. If 3 different fee earners had the same client, would they all identify the same key underlying risk factors? Would they all undertake and document appropriate due diligence to mitigate those risks? And thirdly, efficiency. How many hours are being wasted on manual AML or compliance tasks that could be automated or could be improved if only your tech solutions talk to each other, for example? How much time and effort could be saved and used more effectively to tackle real risk in your business? Those are the 3 sort of things that I wanted the audience, whoever's watching this, to take away. Elizabeth?
I was just going to say, I think those are 3 really, really important points to think about, and they've certainly given me some food for thought as well. Yeah. So thank you, Graham.
Okay, we're coming towards the end of the session. At Amiqus, we make the onboarding process trusted, fast, and accurate. We understand the issues you deal with as a firm, and our clients trust us to make their lives easier and do compliance right. That trust in the service that comes with it is something that we take very seriously. A huge thanks to Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you in this and to hear your practical insights. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me, Graham. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. And secondly, to those who have joined us, thank you so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed the session and will join us more in the future. If you have enjoyed it and found the conversation valuable, please also comment, link, share this on LinkedIn or across your peer network. Finally, if you'd like to discuss anything we've covered in today's session, we're offering 3 free one-to-one Q&A sessions with me. Just let us know if that would be of interest using the pop-up box that should be on your screen now. Many thanks for joining us again today. Thanks.